Ever get that that feeling when you just want to peek behind the curtain, see how the sausage is made?
Hmm.
Today, we're doing exactly that, but instead of sausage, it's city government.
Okay, I like
We're
it.
diving into the official minutes, the nitty-gritty details of a New York City Council meeting.
Buckle up. These minutes, they might seem dry at first glance, but trust me,
Oh, I believe it.
they're a gold mine of local drama, debates, real-life stuff that affects everyone in the city.
I am ready to be surprised.
You will be.
All right. The date is June 20th, 2024. Setting the scene, we're talking 51 city council members. Adrian Adams, the speaker, of course, Gail Brewer, Justin Brannan, big players,
Familiar faces.
all present. But not everyone made it that day.
Right, we have a few absences noted. Krishnan, Lee, and Swang were out for personal reasons. Councilmember Hanks was absent for medical reasons. And then you've got council members Rivera and One. Brand new parents, so
Of course, congratulations are in order.
absolutely. Life goes on even when you're a city council member.
Clearly. So even with a few empty seats that day, there was still a quorum. Now, for those of us who didn't go to city government school, what does that even mean? Why is a quorum such a big deal?
It's kind of like the minimum attendance requirement for a meeting to actually count. Without enough council members present, any votes, any decisions they make, it wouldn't be legally binding.
So, like, the whole meeting could be thrown out.
Exactly. The quorum ensures that whatever actions they take actually reflect at least a majority
Yeah.
of the council.
Okay, so every vote, every decision hinges on having enough people in the room. It's like the most basic rule of the game.
Exactly. It's about making sure the process is legitimate, by the book.
Gotcha. Quorum. Checked. Let's jump into the actual meeting, then. One thing that caught my eye right away, there's a whole debate about renaming a park in the Bronx. Marcus Garvey Square.
Yes. Now that's a loaded topic.
Right. I mean, Marcus Garvey, a huge figure in Black history, but also a controversial one.
Exactly. It's no surprise this sparked some lively discussion in the chambers. How we choose to remember historical figures, especially in a city as diverse as New York, it's always going to bring up a lot of different perspectives.
For sure. And the vote on this one.
It did pass, but it wasn't unanimous. We see a few extensions, actually, from council members Holden, Vernikoff, and Yeager.
Interesting. So clearly some mixed feelings there.
Definitely a topic that warrants its own deep dive sometime.
Absolutely. Now, switching gears completely, let's talk housing. Affordable housing, specifically.
Always a hot button issue.
The minutes mention a property tax break for certain projects in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Seems like the council's really prioritizing this.
And for good reason. With the housing crisis in the city, these tax incentives, they're a big deal. They encourage developers to actually build places that regular people can afford.
Right, because otherwise it's just luxury towers for,
Exactly. These incentives, they're meant to level the playing field a bit.
So it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about real families struggling to afford rent in the city.
100%.
And speaking of hot button issues, something else I spotted, believe it or not, the horse-drawn carriage debate is back.
It never really went away, did it?
Yeah, I guess not. So Councilmember Holden, he's introducing legislation that could phase out those carriages entirely.
Yeah, and that's always going to be a tough one. You've got tradition, you've got animal rights, and of course the tourism industry, all tangled up in this.
It's classic New York. Everyone has an opinion, so I'm sure this won't be the last we hear about it.
Oh, for sure not.
Okay, so we've got historical commemoration, affordable housing, the ethics of horse-drawn carriages. It's a lot. But there's one thing that pops up again and again in these minutes. The Red Hook Coastal Resiliency Project.
Now we're getting to the heart of the matter.
This feels big. Like this isn't just some small-scale initiative. This is about the future of a whole neighborhood.
You've got it. We're talking about a part of the city that's incredibly vulnerable to rising sea levels, to climate change in a very real way. And this project, well, it's ambitious, to say the least.
Give us an idea, what's the grand vision here?
Think flood barriers, redesigned waterfront infrastructure.
Yeah.
They're talking about essentially reimagining the way Red Hook interacts with the water.
That's huge. But also, incredibly complicated, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about building a wall and calling it a day. It's about integrating resilience into the very fabric of the neighborhood.
I bet. Now, I couldn't help but notice these codes that kept popping up. Application C240035MMK and application C240036PQK. It sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Right. But these codes, as dry as they seem, they actually hold the key to understanding the different aspects of this project.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
So application C24000035MMK, that's all about the physical changes to Red Hook. We're talking new streets, adjusting the elevation of the land for better drainage, maybe even creating some new parkland. It's about literally reshaping the neighborhood.
Wow, okay, so some serious urban planning going on there.
Exactly. They're not messing around. And this reshaping, it's not just about aesthetics. It's about making Red Hook more resilient, more adaptable to the changing climate.
It's amazing, really. They're taking this challenge, this threat of rising sea levels, and turning it into an opportunity to rethink a whole neighborhood.
It really shows how these minutes, they're not just about the here and now. They give us a glimpse into the future, how the city is adapting and evolving.
Wow.
But okay, we got one more application code to crack, C24000036PQK. This one's all about land acquisition.
Land acquisition. So, does that mean what I think it means? Like, the city needs to buy up land from people to make this happen.
That's exactly it. And we're not talking about a few small lots. The minutes mention portions of several blocks. I mean, 514, 515, 573. It goes all the way up to 612.
Wow. Okay. That's a huge undertaking.
It is. And anytime you're talking about acquiring that much land, it's going to be complicated. There are going to be questions about fair compensation for the people who own that land, the businesses that might be there, and of course the impact on the community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just redraw the map without affecting people's lives. It makes you think about those families, those business owners. What happens to them when a project like this comes along?
It's a side of these big city projects we don't always hear about, right? The human cost.
Exactly. And those stories, they're not always in the headlines, but you can feel them lurking beneath the surface of these minutes.
You're right to point that out, because as technical as these documents can be, they do offer these little glimpses into the lives that are going to be touched by these decisions. And the Red Hook Project, it really exemplifies that. We're talking about climate change, urban development, social justice.
Big, big issues.
Absolutely. And what happens here in Red Hook, it could have ripple effects,
Yeah.
Other coastal communities, other cities facing these same challenges, they're going to be watching closely.
So Red Hook is kind of like a testing ground in a way. The decisions they make here could set a precedent for how we deal with climate change in cities all over the world.
Exactly. The stakes are pretty high.
No pressure, Red Hook. But listen, before we get too ahead of ourselves, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. Those street renamings. There's one that's been stuck in my head. Vinnie Peanut's Sabatino Corner.
Ah, yes. Vinnie Peanuts. That one definitely caught my eye, too. Just makes you wonder.
Right. Who was this Vinnie Peanuts character? Was he a beloved shopkeeper? A local peanut magnate? We need answers.
It just goes to show these little details, the names we give to places, they hold so much power. They tell stories, even if we don't know all the chapters.
It's like a little mystery tucked away in these minutes.
And who doesn't love a good mystery? It's what keeps us coming back for more.
Speaking of coming back, we've got a lot more ground to cover in these minutes. But first, a quick break, and we are back. After spending all this time with these city council minutes, I gotta say,
What's that?
I have a newfound respect for these council members.
Oh, tell me about it. The sheer volume of stuff they have to deal with.
It's mind-boggling. I mean, we've only skimmed the surface here, and I'm already feeling overwhelmed.
Right. It really makes you appreciate the complexity of running a city, especially one as massive and diverse as New York.
For sure. Every item on that agenda, it represents so much work behind the scenes. All the research, the debates, the back and forth.
It's a whole process.
Yeah.
And it's easy to forget about that. We see a headline, a decision, but we don't always see the human effort that went into making it.
Exactly. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot during this deep dive. These minutes, they're not just about policies and votes. They're about people.
100%. Real lives are affected by every decision made in those council chambers. And that's something we should never lose sight of.
Absolutely. Like we were saying earlier with the Red Hook Project, for example.
Right, the scale of that, the potential impact, it's huge.
And it's not just Red Hook. We saw that with the debate about renaming that park after Marcus Garvey.
Ah, yes. Powerful stuff.
Such a seemingly small thing, changing the name of a park, but
But it's not small at all. It's about how we remember the past, who we choose to honor, whose stories we tell. Those decisions, they shape our understanding of the city, of ourselves.
It's like writing history, in a way, or at least choosing how we want to be remembered. And those choices, they're not always easy.
Definitely not. And that's where things get interesting, because these debates, these disagreements, they force us to confront our values, to really think about what matters.
And who we are as a city.
Exactly.
It's been an incredible journey diving into these minutes with you. We've covered a lot of ground. But before we go, I want to ask, for anyone listening who might be feeling inspired, maybe even a little fired up,
I like it.
what advice would you give them? How can they get involved, make their voices heard?
Well, first of all, don't be intimidated by those council minutes. They might seem dry at first, but trust me, there are stories hidden in there waiting to be uncovered.
Oh, absolutely. So start digging.
Exactly. Pick a topic that interests you, maybe something we talked about today, and go deeper. Read the full text of a bill, do some research online, see what's happening in your own neighborhood.
And if you're feeling really adventurous,
Go to a city council meeting.
yeah.
See the process in action. You might even run into us there.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
All right, well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
Likewise. And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, stay engaged. This is your city. Make your voice heard.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time.
See you then.